Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I'm pleased to be accompanied here by Ernie Parsons, our present Ontarians with Disabilities critic, and the former critic, Steve Peters. We believe in building a better future for Ontario. And to do that, we believe that we have to ensure that every Ontarian has the opportunity to find success. When our people succeed, our province in turn prospers. And that's why we support an Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Today I'm pleased and proud to release an Ontario Liberal report based on a province-wide consultation shared by my caucus colleague, Steve Peters. The report is based on a tour of 15 cities and where over 600 people were able to participate in our hearings. People with disabilities told us that they face barriers every day. Physical barriers, attitudinal barriers, and political barriers. They described for us a patchwork of programs which either fails to bring down those barriers or sets up new ones. The message that we got from Ontarians with disabilities is very simple and straightforward. There ought to be a law. Mike Harris promised just such a law, and then he broke his promise. Well, we intend to hold him to it. 2 years ago today, the Mike Harris government introduced a bill, a blank piece of paper really, that was literally laughed out of the legislature. It was an insult to people with disabilities. We intend to hold Mike Harris to his original promise. And this report does that, but it's not simply another report from the opposition. It documents the frustration faced by many of the 1.5 million Ontarians with disabilities. And with that in mind, I want to commend the people with disabilities who have worked so hard on this issue, including David Lepofsky and his ODA committee. And I want to thank members of my caucus who have served as our party's critic on this important matter in the past few years: Dwight Duncan, Steve Peters, and Ernie Parsons. An Ontarians with Disabilities Act would ensure that all Ontarians have the opportunity to succeed. It will help us build a fairer and more prosperous Ontario and a better future for all of us. I would now like to ask our current critic, Ernie Parsons, to say a few words.
Thank you, Dalton. The craziness is there shouldn't be a need for this report or this press conference. If the Premier had kept his promise, the act would be in place now. Instead, we hear continued dialogue with comments about they prefer a voluntary approach. I would suggest the voluntary approach to testing water has proven that it doesn't work, so the voluntary approach to this will not work. The Premier has said that the Americans with Disabilities Act does not work. No, and we can discuss that at length some other time. But the people in Ontario aren't asking for an Americans with Disabilities Act, they're asking for an Ontarians with Disabilities Act. They have put together their presentations to Steve over the last year on what they believe should happen. But this province has not held public consultation and given them a mechanism to get their voice to this government. Cannot express enough appreciation for Steve for touring Ontario, where 600 people came forward to give advice. They are not having a voice with this government. We will have to be their voice, and hence this report to tell the Premier and the government what Ontario people need. And the next step is up to them. The question is, what will they do with this report? Because there is good stuff in here that will serve the citizens of this province. I'd like to ask Steve for some comments.
Well, thanks very much, Ernie, and thank you, Dalton, for being here. And I think Dalton's presence here today shows the commitment that the Liberal Party has. I know Dalton campaigned on this issue in 1999 and has been a very strong supporter of the movement within our own party of supporting his caucus, but ensuring too that there's a voice for persons with disability around the table, and in particular in the legislature in this province. It was a great experience for myself to tour 15 cities across Ontario this past year. What truly amazed me was the tremendous response that we received everywhere that we went. And I felt it was important when we began the tour that we kicked the tour off in North Bay, because it was appropriate, because North Bay is the home to the Premier of this province, the gentleman that sets the agenda for this province. And I felt it was important to send a message and have the individuals with disabilities in his own community send a message to the Premier loud and clear. And that they did. And I think it was so ironic when we were in North Bay beginning this tour. And one of the things that we tried to do was to ensure that we had barrier-free locations and that we had interpretive services available. Well, right in North Bay alone, the Premier's own backyard, to provide an American Sign Language interpreter, we could not find interpreters. We had to bring interpreters in from Sudbury and Kingston. And that is a sad case. So somebody that was deaf or hard of hearing in North Bay, if they had a medical emergency and they went to the hospital, they were faced with a barrier right off the bat. But what really, as we traveled the province, it became loud and clear the magnitude of this issue, that everywhere we went, there were tremendous crowds and people that wanted to tell not only their personal stories, but the issues and the barriers that they were facing on a daily basis. And the message was loud and clear everywhere we went, that this province needs an Ontarians with Disabilities Act. That we have in this province 1.5 million persons who, because of the lack of this legislation, are being held back from full participation to participate in daily activities in this province. You know, and it's a shame when you have a province that is the driving force, the economic force of this province, and who should be a leader in Canada, that we have an archaic attitude of this government that everything is fine and that there isn't a need for this piece of legislation. And I think it's something that we need to change. It was the message, whether it was from Windsor to Thunder Bay to Ottawa to Kingston or to Toronto, that there was a consistent theme anywhere that we traveled in this province, that there were too many barriers in place, and that government has a role and an obligation to play to work towards removing those barriers. And there was a real sense of frustration from from individuals within the disabled community that the government wasn't listening to them. And the government has talked about an action plan and talked about consulting, and it was obvious to me that they weren't doing anything. So that's why we embarked on this tour, that we went out to listen firsthand what persons with disabilities in this province were saying, where everybody was going to have an opportunity to make a presentation to our committee, unlike the closed-door private hearings that were held by the previous minister, Isabel Bassett, leading up to the joke of a piece of legislation of Bill 83, that everybody was going to have an opportunity to participate. And I want to thank everybody that participated in the hearings, the Ontarians with Disabilities Act committees across this province who were there to help make sure that we had good locations and that we were ready to listen to people. And I too want to thank the Ontarians with Disabilities Act committee for what they have done to keep this issue in the forefront. And I want to really thank Dalton for the opportunity that he gave me as an individual to learn firsthand more of the barriers that persons with disabilities face in this province, and an opportunity for me to work on their behalf and work with my party to ensure that this much needed legislation is put in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions?
Accessibility to Ontarians with physical disabilities comes with a pretty high price tag. Who should pay for that?
Well, I think we, one of the things to keep in mind is that it's costing Ontarians now $2.3 billion on an annual basis for income support programs for our Ontarians who are on disabilities. Now, just think of the revenues that could be generated if we were to find places for we were to remove barriers in order for Ontarians with disabilities to be able to contribute. Tax revenues that might be generated, corporate profits that might be generated as a result. There is no doubt that there are going to be some costs connected with this, but the American experience shows that they are by and large quite modest. For example, Sears, they've got over 300,000 employees. Well, 20,000 have disabilities. It costs them on average $45 for each of those 20,000 employees.
But if I'm a small business owner, say, for example, I'm a restaurant owner, and my washroom is in the basement, which a lot of downtown restaurants in this city have. If I'm physically challenged, I can't get down to that basement. That's a huge cost for that entrepreneur to put a washroom on his first floor, which is what's required. Does he pay for that?
Well, one of the things that I think we've got to do is we've got to sit down, the government has to sit down with the ODA committee, with a variety of sectors around the province, and work out a schedule of how it is that we're going about removing existing barriers and the best way that we might go about doing that. I mean, it's going to require a collaborative effort on the part of everybody. But I can tell you one thing, it's something that we simply must do. America passed this law with the support of Democrats and Republicans 10 years ago. That bastion of socialism passed this law 10 years ago. And the experience, by and large, since that point in time has been very positive. That's what the polls are telling us. And the positive feedback is coming both from Americans with disabilities as well as the business sector. If they can do it, I'm convinced that we can not only do it, but do it better.
There's no expectation that every washroom will become accessible the day after the legislation's passed. The first critical approach is that all new restaurants have. And there's a phasing in, and some may simply not be possible. But there's nothing now that requires a new restaurant to have an accessible washroom. I think we're realistic. I think Ontarians with disabilities are realistic, but my gosh, let's get started on the route, because it may take 5 years.
And just to add to this, there's no reason that the government, with all the super build money that's being spent right now, that there's no reason that every new government facility that is built should not be built without full barrier-free, to be built totally barrier-free. The costs to do it up front, to have the common sense to do it in the beginning, are negligible. There's a gentleman here today I've just spoken with this morning, who's built a brand new condominium. So in less than 3% additional cost to do it right up front. And that's, the government doesn't even need the legislation to do it for themselves. With the super build money that is in place right now, it should be incumbent on every government structure that is built in this province today that is built to total barrier-free status.
Could you resume that in French? From French radio.
Sure. Nous croyons que c'est absolument nécessaire que le gouvernement de Mike Harris procède avec un projet de loi qui assistera tous les Ontariens et les Ontariennes avec des disabilities d'être capable de rencontrer le succès dans notre société. Monsieur Harris a fait cette promesse en 1995 au temps des élections, mais jusqu'à date, il refuse de faire ce qu'il a promis de faire. Et de notre avis, c'est quelque chose qui est absolument nécessaire, non seulement pour les membres de nos familles qui ont des disabilities, mais en plus de cela, c'est une chose qui aidera beaucoup notre économie.
Et qui devrait assumer les coûts de ça?
Ça devrait être le gouvernement avec les différentes communautés, les différents secteurs, incluant le secteur privé, devrait s'asseoir et commencer un dialogue pour faire certain qu'on commence à éliminer ceux qui préviennent tous les Ontariens et les Ontariennes à rencontrer le succès. So that's it then. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.